Hi everyone, and welcome to this tutorial video. In this video I'm going to be showing you how I draw a kitten. In this example I'm using a mechanical pencil on smooth Bristol board paper, but it doesn't matter the kind of equipment you're using as long as you have a pencil and paper. I also recommend using an eraser and a blending stick. If you don't have a blending stick, then feel free to blend the drawing with your fingers. Before adding the outlines of a drawing like this, I like to add a vertical and a horizontal line to help with the symmetry. And then I like to start off the drawing with the eyes. For the outlines of the eyes, they are very circular along the lower lid, and the upper lid is quite flat along the top and along the inside edge. The eyes themselves are about 1.5 eyes width apart, and at this point I spend a lot of time trying to make sure they are as symmetrical as possible. And then I added some outlines for the pupils and a rough area of where I wanted the highlights to be. After that I drew some lines downwards from the eyes, and then I used them as a guideline of where to centre the nose. The nose is downwards from the horizontal line by about the height of one of the eyes. And then from that I added a faint outline of where I wanted the mouth to be. With the main details of the face sketched, it was time for me to add the outlines of the rest of the kitten's head. I wanted to keep the lines really faint around the outside because I was going to make this drawing of a kitten very fluffy, and so I wanted the outlines to be very blurred, and I was going to use the blending stick for this, and so I didn't want to add any thick outlines to cause any issues and having to use the eraser a lot of the time. It's always a good guideline to make sure the outlines aren't too dark to begin with. After all of the outlines were sketched, it was time to move on to the shading, and with drawings like this I always like to start off the shading the details of the eyes. And for the shading of these I added some dark outlines around the edges, and then I added some darker shading towards the top, using a blending stick to help smooth the shading across the whole eye itself. Adding the shading along the top really helps with the 3D effect, and it helps to show the shade that's cast by the upper eyelid. And I also made sure to leave the highlights to contrast with the shading and help a lot with the realistic effect. I also decided to add some highlights along the bottom of the eye and towards the inner corner. Along the lower eyelid I added a layer of small dark fur. This really helped to define the shape of the eyelid, and it really helps to make the eye stand out. And then I also added some darker fur from the eyes towards the nose to help define the shape of that as well. For the shading of the nose I used a blending stick to help keep the skin texture smooth, and then I used the eraser to help add some highlighting around the edges, making sure to leave some darker shading towards the inside of the nostrils. The fur at the tip of the nose is extremely fine, and I used a blending stick at this point to help make that easier. The fur itself gets longer and longer as you work your way up the nose, and it's all going in one direction towards the top of the head. I left some lighter hairs going around the top edges of the eyes, and I tried to keep them as symmetrical as possible, and then I also did the same around the bottom of the eyes. When it comes to drawing hair or fur, it's extremely important to remember that you don't have to worry so much about the placement, as hair or fur is always moving and changing, and you don't have to copy a reference material exactly. Just use quick fine strokes with a blending stick and the help of an eraser to help add the lighter hair over the top. That's the method that I've been using for my drawings, and I really recommend it. It's a lot of fun when you get into a rhythm of adding the patterns on each side of the face. So for this drawing I used quick fine strokes to begin with, and then I used a blending stick over the top of that, and then I used the eraser over the top of that again to help add the lighter hair. For the shading underneath the nose and around the mouth area I used the same method, but I left the shading a lot lighter. The darker shading is towards the mouth itself, and then I used the lighter highlights to define the shape of the mouth. For the fur on the kitten's cheeks I tried to keep the patterns as symmetrical as possible, but I also wanted to make sure that it didn't look too exact, because hair is always moving and changing, so you tried to keep a rough symmetry. It's also important to keep in mind that the hair is moving outwards from the eyes, and that rule is actually relevant across most of the kitten's face. I then left some markings for where I wanted the whiskers to be, and for the whiskers themselves I started off by adding some dark strokes with the mechanical pencil, and then over the top of that I used the eraser to add some lighter whiskers. For the top of the kitten's head, I used the same rule of using the quick fine strokes working outwards from the eyes, and then I used the blending stick over the top of that, and then used the eraser over the top of that again, sometimes adding some more hairs over the top of that again with the pencil, and just building up the layers. I wanted to make this kitten look as fluffy as possible, so this method worked well. And for the ears, I used some darker shading around the upper edges, and then I added some medium shading towards the inside of the ears. Once the medium shading had been added, I then used the eraser over the top of that to build up a layer of hairs in front of the ear. And lastly, I wanted to add a little bit more shading to help define the shape of the kitten's head. So I started off by adding some medium shading underneath the kitten's chin and around the kitten's cheeks, using the quick fine strokes of the pencil, and then I used the blending stick over the top of that. After that, I used the eraser to add some hairs to the kitten's chin and around the kitten's cheeks, and this really helps to define the shape and show how fluffy the kitten is. And having that contrast between the erased areas and the medium shading really helps to define that area, and it makes the drawing as a whole stand out from the page. I really hope this video was helpful in some way, and if you work on anything similar, then feel free to show me your work on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. And if you enjoy videos like this, then make sure you're subscribed. Any likes or shares on this video are hugely appreciated. It really means a lot to me, and I love working on these videos. If you want to follow me on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram and follow along with the progress photos throughout the week, then be sure to check out the links in the description box below. And once again, thank you so much for the support on this channel. I really hope this video was helpful in some way. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you all soon.